I mean, I didn't do cheerleading, but I remember it. What's up, everybody? I brought out my hair for this one. No hat today. All right. We are streaming live and direct from Newark, New Jersey, Brick City in the house. Let me clear my throat. Ahem. Ahem. All right. My throat has been cleared, I hope. I get kind of, I get butterflies when I come talk to y'all live. It's a thing. Just because I'm a wildly experienced podcaster and content creator and broadcaster doesn't mean that I still don't get butterflies. For you guys watching over here, the live stream, thank you. This is the pregame. This is the pre-show. The pre-show, before the after party, after the party, after the show. Boom. Today we have a couple of special guests. Today I'm going to have two guests at the same time. It's amazing. Crazy technology. Pablo, I'm trying, man. I see you out there. Thank you. Thank you for checking in. We got a good episode today. Yesterday's episode was fantastic. The great Ernie Panicoli, hip-hop photographer extraordinaire. Of course, his work is on display at Cornell University's great hip-hop archive, hip-hop collection up at Cornell University. And it's available for the public. You can just go to the website and type in any rapper from history, and Ernie Panicoli took that picture. Top from the Bush. What's up, brother? It's been a long time. How you doing, sir? So I appreciate y'all for checking in early. This is the pre-show. We're gonna get kicking in a few minutes, waiting for the other half of the other third of the guests, I guess, to make sure they're here. So if you're just tuning in, what the hell is this? What is this? What's going on? For a couple of years, I've had this podcast called Hip Hop Could Save America, and I interview a bunch of people that are using hip hop in innovative ways, not just entertainment. We don't do the entertainment and gossip kind of thing here. We do the hip hop that's being used in education or in health and wellness, or in science and technology, or, all the things, politics, social justice, all those things, all those intersections. And, yeah. So I've been doing that podcast for some time now, and decided that pandemic life wasn't complicated enough. So I'd go live every day for the month of September. Well, it's Monday through Thursday. We're doing this live. So we've done about 5 of these now. This is 1, 2, 3. We started on the 1st. So I've had folks like Silent Night, the great artist, which we're going to talk about today. He's an Innocence Project ambassador. He's the artist in residence for the Newsbeat podcast, which if you're watching, you can see is today's guest. We had him on the inaugural episode. There's a great artist, a great guy, good friend of mine. We had Dialect, who's an acclaimed playwright and MC, merges hip-hop into the fine arts, merges hip-hop and hip-hop theater. We had Adam 7, formerly known as Mecha Godzilla, Ravage, a longtime member of independent underground hip-hop, talking about his evolution in his career and how he's had to change styles and move with the times, and even change his name because of a cease and desist from the Godzilla people. So how do you like that? So yeah, craziness. And of course, once again, yesterday's guest, Ernie Panicoli, the great Rachel Rockstar. I see you. Hello, love. The great Ernie Panicoli, one of the upper echelon hip hop photographers of all time. So shouts to everyone who's been checking in and following this. Take a moment. You can share this. If you're looking on Facebook, you can just share this to your peoples. Let it know. Oh, my man, he's up to something. I got to tune in. This one's important. This one means a lot to me, this episode, and they all do. But this is sort of another driving force behind everything that I do. And it is the intersection, again, of hip hop, music, culture, and ethos, and social justice, which is important right now, but we've been doing it for years. So Let me have a little sip of this, which is not coffee. Let a couple more people trickle in. Once again, just share this real quick. This is the pre-show. This is the pre-game. The party before the after party. And then we will get to we'll start the show, and then I'll talk a little bit, and then we'll cut right to our guests. So this is super dope. Shouts again, Pablo on the check-in. Top from the bush, the mighty. Rachel Rockstar. I can see your comments. I can see them no matter what platform you're on. They all get consolidated here. So I would love for you to keep interacting throughout the show, talk amongst each other, talk to me. And then also any questions you have for us. This is going to be an interactive show. The technology is kind of crazy on this one. I got some audio sources and mingling. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. I'm not going to keep y'all waiting too long. I always get all fluttery right before showtime. It's crazy. Rachel Rockstar on a share. You're the best in the world, Rachel. So yeah. So by the way, if you're listening now and watching the live feed, we also put these up on the podcast feed. I'll mention that during the preamble. But hold on a second, y'all. The adrenaline flowing. So if you're not subscribed to the if you're not subscribed to the podcast, please make sure you do that as well, because we also drop a Friday bonus. So we have the Monday to Thursday of these, and then the Friday bonus. So I'm putting a link in, some important links. Oops. Why is that always wrong? Y'all wouldn't even know all the things I got going on here. Scratch that. This is the current links. Boom. So yeah, anyway, let's just go. Let's stop talking. What up, everybody? All right, so if you guys are ready, I'm ready. Let's do it. My guests won't hear this, but there's a theme song, and it plays for everyone. And so it's theme song time.
The thing about hip-hop today is it's smart. It's insightful. The way that they can communicate a complex message in a very short space is remarkable. And a lot of these kids, they're not going to be reading the New York Times. That's not how they're getting their information.
My hip-hop will rock and shock the nation. Hip-hop culture is more than music.
Peace to you and speak the truth. Show 'em what peace can do when there reach for you.
My hip-hop will rock and shock the nation. Rap is something you do. Hip-hop is something you live.
So hip-hop didn't invent anything, but hip-hop reinvented everything.
But how you doing, everybody? It's your man, Manny Faces. Welcome to another live episode of Hip Hop Can Save America. I want to welcome you to the whole live stream version of this podcast. I'm watching you live. I'm watching you talk in the comment section. Please tell me if I sound good, if I look good. I brought my hair out for this one. If I smell good, taste good, feel good. Let me know in the comments section of wherever you're watching. You might be watching live on Facebook. You might be watching live on YouTube. You might be watching this on demand on either one of those outlets, or you might be listening to it on the podcast feed. If you're podcast listeners, you've gotten used to this by now. I've done this for a few days now. You see what I'm doing. Every Monday through Thursday for the month of September 2020, we're coming live. We're bringing the Hip Hop Can Save America podcast live. So you were previously a podcast listener. You know what it's all about. You know that we interview people that are using hip hop in innovative ways in areas outside of merely entertainment. The incorporation of hip hop in education, science and technology, politics and activism and social justice, which is going to be a big topic today. The fine arts, did I say health and wellness, spirituality, all of these aspects of life. And I'm working on things like plumbing, can be intersected with hip hop in ways that actually improve humanity and uplift society. This isn't theoretical. This is proven. And the people I talk to have the receipts. So if you go back and binge, you'll find out more about this. You can subscribe to the podcast wherever you find podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn. Subscribe to Hip Hop Can Save America. and you can binge, go back into the archives and find out all the luminaries that we've talked to in the past. Yesterday's live episode was a great one. All of them have been great. Shouts to Silent Night, Dialect, Adam Seven, Dr. Marty Kaysen, and Ernie Panicoli, the legendary hip-hop photographer, yesterday's guest. So there is incentive to go back if you're just getting up on us today. Shouts to Silent Night in the mix. He's actually on the check-in and also was our inaugural guest. He will come up today, I suspect. That is because today is a special day, and I really appreciate your attention today. This one's important. It's important to me, but it's important because it really exemplifies exactly what I'm trying to do and what I'm working on and I'm bringing to you every day. The intersection of hip-hop can amplify and improve everything. And one of the areas that really needs improvement and really needs all of our collective energy is social justice these days. All days. Even maybe more now than ever, or at least in my lifetime, and many of yours as well. So I bring this up and I say that I have something special that I work on that y'all might know about, and people who see this or hear this might not know about, that I needed to share. And I'm so glad that the fellas that I'm about to bring on were able to work with me, first of all, and come on the show and talk about it. Basically, if I told you that there was a podcast, you listen to podcasts, you're listening to one now, you're watching one, a podcast that's a journalism podcast, so a news podcast that covers social justice issues, sometimes in depth and way ahead of a lot of mainstream outlets, really on top of the issues that are affecting marginalized and underserved and underfunded communities across the country, really ahead of the game sometimes. Interviews all the experts, the analysts, the educators, the journalists, the activists, the people on the ground doing the work, the grassroots, the people who are being affected directly by these issues. We know poverty, mass incarceration, the wealth disparity, education disparity. And if I told you that podcast was award-winning, beat out the New York Times, beat out the Wall Street Journal, beat out Bloomberg, beat out like big name organizations that also have podcasts. The New York Press Club said best journalism podcast 2018. Society of Professional Journalists said best journalism podcast 2019 and 2020. Currently, right now, reigning champion. And that podcast got a whole bunch of hip hop and rap in it. It's a news podcast, but it's got rappers in it. Best journalism podcast out there, according to these people that know these things. Well, it's true. It's the Newsbeat podcast, of which I'm a big part. And it was only right that we came on to talk about this phenomenon that is the Newsbeat podcast. And with that, I want to welcome two of the three others that are behind this podcast movement. My friends Rashed Mian, Christopher Tawarski, managing editor and editor-in-chief of the Newsbeat podcast, respectively. Gentlemen, start your engines.
How's it going?
Good up, Manny.
What's up? I'm really happy to have you guys here. Thank you so much. Obviously, we work together all the time, and I wanted to bring some attention to the Newsbeat podcast, sort of in this official format that we're doing. So thanks for coming on and talking about it, yeah.
Well, look, I'm wearing the
shirt. You hardly ever talk to me. That's funny. You're a funny guy. So listen, the Newsbeat podcast, as I explained to people, is literally, if you've heard it, you know. But if you haven't heard it, that might be foreign to you. How can there be news and hip hop and rappers and music all inside a podcast? What is it, like Hamilton? Do you guys rap the news? You know, we talk about mass incarceration, noflation. But no, it's not that. It's not Lin-Manuel Miranda's news podcast.
Are you recording? We need that on a recording for a track. We need that mixed in there somehow with S-Cut.
The Newsbeat podcast, for those that don't know, is a blend of interviews conducted by yourselves, for the most part, where you're interviewing, again, experts, activists, people doing the work in these social justice issues. You're interviewing them about their work. We're weaving those interviews thanks to a script that's assembled by you guys, the best pieces and a sort of flowing narrative of all of the interviews about that episode subject. And I weave in music so that it's sort of like a score, right? Like a musical score, like in a movie. And we have that going. It sets a mood. It's crescendos. It's really kind of cool. And then under most circumstances, we'll talk about this. We actually invite independent hip hop artists to craft original lyrical contributions to each episode, about each episode. And we usually have them 3 16-bar verses sprinkled, interspersed throughout the episode. That 30 to 40-minute episode is a Newsbeat episode. And you got to hear it to understand it, but it's freaking awesome. So, of course, I invite everyone to go after this. But right now, let's talk about the importance of this, how it came to be, how we began this journey to award-winning stardom. And that really starts with you guys, in as much as it does with me. We are journalists. You are journalists. You are award-winning, multiple, dozens of awards for your journalism over the years. Chris, you were the editor-in-chief of the Long Island Press for many years. Back when it was an alternative weekly in print and then online that covered a lot of the news that wasn't being covered by the mainstream, sort of that rugged underground, I'm going to get to the bottom of this kind of investigative journalism that we were doing for Long Island, New York. But then that sort of started branching out into other areas. Rashed, you jumped on in the mix as well during those times. And the two of you started covering things that were outside of Long Island's purview. It was more of a national civil liberties kind of thing. Can you guys explain a little bit about your background as journalists and how you outgrew the Long Island Press?
Well, since Chris is the mentor here, I'm going to let him get started.
I mean, what a blessing, right? As you said, alternative news weeklies. It was us against them, We considered ourselves the voice of the voiceless. We went after Democrats. We went after Republicans. It didn't matter.
Right. We were after cops thrown in the mix.
We were after the truth, We exposed a lot of bad stuff, from environmental crimes to political malfeasance to corporate corruption. The list goes on, and it was, a total blast. And so that's where we sort of cut our teeth. And as you mentioned, Rashed came in as an intern. I had started as an editorial assistant way back when, and started covering really, discrimination against Muslims and Muslim Americans. Started covering, perpetual war, the war on whistleblowers waged by our government, really against the truth, which should be celebrated, in the public good.
Right.
We covered Chelsea Manning's court-martial at Fort Meade, NSA headquarters.
Right. I just want to interject, one of only few journalists that were covering that monumentally important story.
That's right. And it's, it's testament to our publisher's commitment to the truth. Jed Morey, who's the executive producer of Newsbeat.
Absolutely.
And, that's the kind of journalism that we did. And, what I like to say is we translate that sort of ethos, that spirit, and continue it with Newsbeat, now in a sonic form.
Yeah.
We take that journalism, we meld it with what I think is, all of our other passion, which is music. And we get to shine a light, on these issues, on these people, through the written word, through interviews, and through music.
Yes, indeed.
Rashed?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, Manny, how we sort of outgrew Long Island. I think the turning point for us, and I think Chris, and I think even Jed, who Chris mentioned, our executive producer, I think they might, agree with this. I think that turning point was probably the Occupy Wall Street movement.
Mm.
During that, it was like 2011, 2012. And Jed just one day went out of the office and he went to the city and started covering the protests before a lot of the mainstream outlets went there. He realized that it was going to be a significant movement, and it was. And it's sort of crazy when you think about a lot of the issues that they were talking about then that people were criticizing them for. They were just complaining that they were taking up spot in the city, and they were and they just became a nuisance. But a lot of things that they were talking about, especially income inequality, is still going on today. And I think from that moment on, the other issues that Chris mentioned, the civil liberties, perpetual war in this country,
Right.
and the social justice topics that we cover a lot on Newsbeat. Everything is just it started then, and it hasn't let up, and that just speaks to the sort of crisis that has been unfolding in America for a long time,
Right.
that's been plaguing this country, and nobody I guess felt comfortable just digging in and exposing what's really going on, and how the little people are the ones being hurt, even as we see corporations and billionaires making money hand over fist during
Yeah.
the coronavirus pandemic. So it's all something that's just continued on for the last 10 years.
Well, we are the 99%, and we have to, but that it's interesting that a lot of the progressive thought, a lot of the Bernie Sanders movement, a lot of the things that we're talking about today as being, rights and necessity and fueling, I think, the social justice movement, not just the racial justice issues, which are, certainly I think the priority, but underlying that is the poverty, the 1%, the wealth gap, even between non-minority groups. It all came to light. Occupy Wall Street kind of really started bringing that to people's attention. And being in this age of information, we were out there, we covered it, we were out there in the middle of the Occupy Wall Street, and I think we caught that bug too, to be honest. I know I did. I'd always been obviously active in issues, but when we were out there in Occupy and we saw like what it meant to kind of really push back against things, something changed for us. Is that we got to tell these stories too, and we could do it in a way that MSNBC might not be.
Yeah, that's the thing. A lot of people obviously caught on to that movement, and others, later on, Black Lives Matter. But it's also the way in which these protests and demonstrations and just larger political movements are covered by the mainstream, right? They'll show sort of the titillating coverage, buildings on fire, people, confrontational moments with the police and things like that. But what you really want to do is just get into the nitty gritty and talk to people, right? And I think that's what we were good at. And I think that's something that continues on to today with Newsbeat, is we just want to get to the issues, right? Because people are covering some of the same things that we are doing, maybe to not to the extent, and we are getting to stories quicker than the mainstream media,
right?
A lot of times. And but it's really just talking about the issues, and I think that's what's critical about what we're doing at Newsbeat. We're getting down to the issues that are really affecting people, especially mass incarceration, and also sort of what lays underneath it, why people are suffering so much. We want to get to the root causes.
Let's let people know. Just you mentioned some of them. Chris, you can jump in on this. I'm going to show the viewers our episodes page so they see some of the issues that we've been covering since we started this in 2017, picking it up in earnest later that year in 2018, 2019, and continuing even under COVID circumstances, even under the restrictions that the pandemic has placed upon us. We don't have as many artists contributing. We'll talk about that. But just to show people kind of what we're talking about here. I'm just going through from the beginning. MLK, explain the inaugural episode, the MLK, the pilot, why we felt that doing the news or doing the disseminating information the way we can was important when looking at someone as well documented, as well known, as written about as Martin Luther King. What could we bring to the Martin Luther King and then subsequently the Rosa Parks story?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned Jed earlier, and it all starts with him. I mean, he had this vision for an audio amplification, of social justice issues, and you know, it was MLK's anniversary coming up, and as you know, I mean, you were a critical part of that, and he had, you know, just this vision of telling a different side of that story.
Yeah.
You know, through music, and shining a light on campaigns, the Poor People's Campaign in particular,
Right.
that most of the you know, most people don't know about, you know, and that's what
Right.
he wanted his legacy to be, not the "I have a dream" speech.
Right.
So
Right.
it's, you know, showing these lesser known sides of these stories, you know, correcting the narrative,
Right.
was very important to him.
Right. And it makes a lot of sense once you listen to the episode. You don't hear about Martin Luther King's poor people's campaign movement as much as you hear about the, as we say, the whitewashed or the whittled down to, you know, the epitaph of "I have a dream." "I have a dream" speech is great, and it's, you know, it's certainly a pivotal point in history that should be, you know, lauded and studied and appreciated. But it was not the end all be all by a long shot when it came to what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s overall legacy should be about. We had on that episode, we had Reverend, you know his name, the Reverend from the Glen Cove Church in Long Island. I'm at a loss. I apologize. Not Barber. that's a different guy. What was the Reverend? Roger C. Williams from the Glen Cove Baptist Church. Also, we had Larry Ham on there, who was a longtime activist. He came in sort of a later iteration. Larry Ham, a longtime activist and leader of the People's Organization for Progress, based out here in Newark, New Jersey, really explaining why it is that we're doing a disservice to Dr. King if we don't advance these ideas of the rest of his legacy. Yes.
Yeah, and you know, something that I would like to add is just, you know, we teach, you know, in school every year, which we point out in the episode, you know, obviously kids are learning about the "I have a dream" speech when King himself admitted that his dream had turned into a nightmare. Right. That's something that we also put in this episode because, you know, we can't just whitewash, you know, the life and legacy of MLK. We need to talk about him, you know, as a real human and as someone who was more radical than the mainstream media would like us to know, you know.
Right.
So I think it was just the little things like that, you know, shine a light on who he was, and it helps. I mean, we've seen so many educators reach out to us and say, you know, we play this episode for our students because we want them to learn about, you know, the life and history of MLK, and not just what's in the textbooks or not just what, you know, society, you know, wants us to believe. So, you know, I think of all the things, I think that's what makes us proud. You know, I don't want to speak for you guys, but just the fact that people are using these episodes like MLK inside the classroom, I think speaks volumes about what we're doing, and, you know, and how, like what Chris said, we're just trying to get to the truth, right?
Yeah.
And the truth is important, especially when we're talking about a figure like MLK.
And
Yes,
and on that note, you know, a lot of the topics we cover, a lot of the events, a lot of the people, a lot of the atrocities. Unfortunately, you know, an American student is just not going to read in a history book. You know, and so that's, you know, as Rashad mentioned, part of that sort of series we have, you know, what you didn't learn in school.
Right.
And
ironically, the schools, some progressive teachers are saying, we want to learn, we want to teach this in school, and they're reaching out to us for, you know, to be able to use our material, which is just astounding, just incredible. It's listed in some curriculum somewhere here and there. We have a couple of teacher testimonials, matter of fact, in a couple of our episodes. So that again ties into the nature of which how we present the material. It is interviews. We go into much more in-depth interviews. That was a pilot, so it was just kind of a couple of voices. We've had Dr. Cornel West on our show. We've had Rosa Clemente, former Green Party vice presidential candidate, Rosa Clemente, and hip hop head, for sure. Rosa Clemente on the show. We've had Chris Hedges on the show. We've had Barrett Brown on the show. Who else have we had? I mean, these are luminaries in these fields that they're covering and issues that they're involved in. These aren't just, you know, online pontificators, randos from, you know, from a basement somewhere. We get to the heart of the issue with a lot of the actual voices that are leading these efforts. Yes.
Yes, and I would like just to mention as well. I mean, you know, besides the academics, you know, the authors, the caseworkers, the staff attorneys, shining a light and giving them a voice, you know, the people in the field trying to make a difference.
Yeah.
You know, we've had on the musical side, I just re-listened to a couple episodes too. And as you guys, I mean, just so powerful. Silent Night, Liquid, obviously shout outs.
Yes.
In 2 episodes particularly, they personify people, you know, stuck in this horrific, you know, death trap, you know.
Yeah.
Silent Night.
We talked about. We had him on the first episode of this of the live stream series that we're doing here, and we talked about his contribution to Exonerated and Broke, where he took on the persona of someone who has been in jail for decades, falsely arrested, falsely accused, gets out of jail, gets no compensation, but he talks about how it feels to be that person. Now, we had Alan Newton on the show, who was an actual exoneree. So we have, like you say, the people that are going through it, being affected by these issues, and then the artists take that to just a visceral, compelling level that's beyond. It's Chrissy. I have an idea. Why don't we let the people know what we're talking about by letting them hear something? Let's try it. This is technologically crazy right now. Exonerated and Broke. It's an episode that we had, which Chris, I think you were alluding to, and we're great. And shouts to Silent Night. Shouts, as you mentioned, to Liquid. Those are our 2 artists in residence. Let's let the people know what the hell we're talking about when it comes to the blending of music and social justice issues. Explain very briefly, Exonerated and Broke, Alan Newton, his story, and then we're going to play a clip of what this podcast sounds like.
Rashad, you could weigh in, but Alan Newton, wrongfully convicted of horrific crimes, spent 21 years, I think, in prison, only to be exonerated through DNA evidence with the Innocence Project, who Rebecca Brown was also, the executive director, was also on that episode, only to find that, Rashad, fill in the blanks.
Yeah, so once you, Alan Newton, like many other people who are incarcerated, who wrongly incarcerated, find themselves, they leave prison and they're just left to their own devices. And some states have laws that will, provide, give you, restitution for serving that time wrongly. Others don't, and others just make it incredibly hard to get financial, assistance. We're talking about hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of dollars, right? For people who spent, potentially decades in prison for something that they didn't do. And Newton was one of these people.
This is an episode of Newsbeat called Exonerated and Broke, one of our early episodes. You will hear from Alan Newton. You will hear from our artist in residence, Silent Night. It's just a snippet, y'all, but just to give you an idea what the hell we're talking about. Exonerated and Broke, Newsbeat podcast.
Because, I had a photograph in the books from, 1979, the year I graduated high school. I got arrested for a fight that happened outside the PAL. I was gambling, with a lot of other friends and, money dispute. So when the victim was going through some photographs, I got picked out and I was arrested June 28th. We actually had tickets. We actually had the ticket stubs. So we had, the evidence, where we was in a different borough in Queens County. But they was hell bent on making an arrest, regardless of the circumstances. And, at that time, there wasn't no DNA how it is today. So you couldn't just prove your case, on that facts. And so they wanted to go with what they had. I was found guilty of rape, robbery, and assault in the building. Even when I was trying to prove my innocence for all those years, in regards to, the the alibi and, it was wrong. It wasn't till, the advent of DNA testimony came out that it was like, look, if I can find this DNA, I can absolutely prove that I didn't commit this crime. Because it's DNA. The DNA doesn't lie.
Lying down with my wife and child, tired, been a long night, but now I'm chilling, happy, full. We built a nice little life, I'm proud. Bell ringing, it's late though. Door knocking, it's straight though. Y'all stay here, I'ma get it. Probably somebody got locked out the place, Fast forward this whirlwind, now I'm hurled into a cell. Got my girl flipping as well. My whole world slipping, no bail. Feel like I'm sitting right on the rail. How the hell they really gon' think I got it in me? I ain't never heard a damn soul, God forgive me. Plus I got 4 witnesses, really? Cause I'm a prior, cause of my skin. I told you I'm tired, you ask me again. You tell me again, repeat it. If I wanna see my family, I just eat it. Guess I just pleaded, cause so far this pleading ain't making a difference. I feel so defeated. How is this legal? How is this real? Yo, everything feels so walls close to this. I know my family and friends know the deal. None of that matters if we being real. I hope my family and friends know the deal. We gotta fight this, we gon' kill. Tired, confused, yeah, I'm confession, but I ain't never fired a weapon, and I ain't never touched no girl that's a liar or die first, not even a question.
DNA is really considered in the forensic community to be the gold.
So that's an example of the Newsbeat podcast, y'all. I hope everyone heard that correctly. Technologically, we're trying to make this work, let you hear and feel and see and taste and smell everything we're doing over here. So shouts to once again to Silent Night. Shouts to Alan Newton. Alan Newton's story was incredibly compelling. We spoke to him in his apartment. You hear his birds chirping in the background. We were right there. He gave us his heart and soul in that interview. And then to hear Silent Night say, okay, I'm going to take a few elements of what he talked about. I'm not going to retell his story because that's easier for an artist, I think, to just say, all right, I'm going to do exactly what he just said. I'm going to just put it in a rhyme form. It's not easy, but it's easier. But what he did was Silent Night is great because he does his own research. He hears about other people going through the same problem and kind of, molds that into his artistic interpretation of the issue and delivers it with just incredible talent. So that's what we're talking about, y'all.
I think you mentioned it, Manny. It's also, that what he did on that episode was so powerful that he now does work for the Innocence Project along with, a lot of other celebrities and just high profile people who are trying to raise awareness about people who are wrongfully convicted. And, it's important work that's being done, especially for Silent Night to do that. So it's incredible what he's able to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, being invited by the Innocence Project to work with the Innocence Project, attended, as he talked about in his interview, he's met he's honored 5, he's gone to events, and he's their artist. He's an artist ambassador, all because of what we did at Newsbeat. That's something that, now look, I'm not the type to brag. I'm
really?
actually,
wait,
yeah,
really?
I know. I'm very.
I think somebody took over the hosting duties for.
I'm not the type to, put myself out there.
He's very humble. He's very humble.
Eastern time.
He's an introvert.
But I'm super proud of what we do, and I'm bringing us on the show to talk about the thing that we do. That's very self-centered. But this is the point. This is the important part of it. What we do isn't just talking about an issue. We could be a round table. We've had backbeat episodes where we kind of we banter about the issue, and there's plenty of shows that do that. No disrespect. We could just put out articles and write. You guys are fantastic writers. Do note that every episode of Newsbeat has a complete article to go with it that goes way into more detail about the issues that we just covered. We do that on purpose. And then we ask people at the end, or we give people at the end of the episode and in the article, information. We tell them, these are the people that we work with on this episode. This is Rebecca from the Innocence Project. This is, whoever's in the, it is Rebecca, right? Whoever's in the episode and whatever organization they're with, we give you their information again. We remind you at the end, we say, listen, if this touched you, Exonerated and Broke made me cry when I was making it, when I was putting it together. There's clips in there of other people that have gone through these kind of news clips of people that got exonerated after decades in jail, didn't get a dime, and then died before they could, get any compensation. You got to sue the city or sue the state You know, you got to find a lawyer that's going to take up your cause. You're just coming out of jail. That's already hard enough. You're coming out of jail after 30 years. That's hard enough. I got people that are locked up. They come out of jail. It's a whole different world. Alan Newton talked about, what's a Metro card, bro? Where are the tokens at? Like, you know what I mean? How to navigate the world, how to get a job, how to come back to society, and then not have any compensation for being wrongly accused all those years. So we told people, if this bothers you, then go the Innocence Project. Do you know about the Innocence Project? And we send people there. Of course, the Innocence Files now on Netflix, spreading this message far and wide. So we're always happy to make these connections if it's just letting people know what they can do to take action, to affect change. We always talk about it. I think that's by far the most fulfilling part of doing this. You would agree?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think, at the end of the day, we want to report the facts as we know them, but also just, as you're saying, just give people resources, so, they can do something with that. That could mean just going to vote.
Yep.
That can mean, supporting a local organization that does similar work than a group that we featured on the podcast.
Right.
It could, mean as a teacher, just spreading the news that way, right?
Yep.
As an educator. So it's all about giving people the resources. And, again, I just want to highlight the work of our artists, because this is something that I've shared with you guys before, that, the one reason we step away, we write it, we come up with the script of the podcast, and we give it to Silent Night, we give it to Liquid, we give it to the other artists, and we let them do what, let their creativity just burn. And because we see what they're doing as a sort of form of journalism as well, right?
Yes.
So,
I'm talking about, we were talking about this with Ernie Panicoli yesterday, how the artists of our generation, they are the griots, they are the messengers.
Yeah.
They're as capable, in some cases more capable than other journalists or people who call themselves journalists.
Right.
They see the world too. They participate in the world, and they have this incredible talent at translating that into a compelling, poetical, or music oriented, or just linguistic way of catching people's attention. They're just as qualified as we are.
Just the ability, I'm still amazed, just the ability to condense, what's basically, I don't want to get into the nuts and bolts, but like a $2,500 word script to three short verses
into 16 bars. Yeah.
It's incredible that what they're able to do and what they're able to produce. And I think that comes across, I hope it does, to listeners.
And the music and the craftsmanship that the artists bring, in terms of storytelling, you could write, as Rashad said, 25. We've written 7,000 word stories, trying to incite, a reaction, trying to inspire, which is what, another part of our mission.
Right.
But music, it bleeds into the blood, it melts into your blood, it digs into your bones, it hits your soul, and to motivate and inform and get you off the couch,
Hip hop's always had, obviously, I think for me, I'm a little biased, the best musical genre, artistic form, linguistic form to do this spoken word, that kind of, because it's poetic. So obviously there's something magical about poetry and the way things rhyme and why that affects us as humans. There's something always magical about that. That's why songs and music and poems are always so forceful to us, instead of just hearing a lecture. You might remember, hey, we went to Bus Boys and Poets in DC, man, and I saw some things that night that I haven't forgotten to this day. You see things, they remain with you. Hip hop's always been able to do this great because of the blending of words and music. And I think this exemplifies that. I often talk, as you guys know, and some of the people paying attention know, that I always get mad. Mad is probably the right word. I always get frustrated. I always get discouraged when you hear people lament the inability of hip hop to, be protest music anymore, of being substantive, of carrying a message, of motivating and uplifting people, and doing all the things that for a time hip hop was very well known for. The Public Enemies, the KRS-Ones, the Brand Nubians, the Poor Righteous Teachers. You know, when they were on the radio and hip hop was in that kind of golden era, as it's called, you had these messengers speaking these things and they were reaching the masses. UMTV Raps, radio stations across the country, mixtapes throughout the world. And while that has moved away from the corporate controlled ways of disseminating music, it is by no means, you know, a dead or dying thing. There's underground artists or independent artists that have wild followings throughout the world. There are artist activists that are putting in the work. We've had him on our show. Rebel Diaz is a great example I love to pull up. We had him on the Newsbeat podcast. They contributed to 2 episodes. These brothers have started community centers. They're activists. They're sons of revolutionaries. They're out there doing the work and putting it in their music, but also in the streets, organizing. I mean, there's only one Rebel Diaz, but there's a lot of Rebel Diaz's in the world. And using the power of music, hip hop specifically, to inform and engage and incite people happens all the time, every day. And Newsbeat is just a really polished way of putting it all together and letting people know that this happens.
Yeah. Again, I think we're biased. I think Newsbeat, you know, speaks to a couple things for me. I think it speaks to the importance of independent media and independent hip hop.
You love that independent media. And I love that independent hip hop. So it's a beautiful,
perfect marriage. But
Perfect
also
marriage.
because, you know, I think in independent media, you're able to you're not supposed to be biased, but you're able to empathize, right? We're able to empathize with people and the issues that, you know, they're suffering from. I think the same thing with, you know, we keep mentioning the verse that you just played from Silent Night, but also the verse from Liquid in the Me Too Behind Bars episode. Look, you know, people, they might not have had these experiences.
Right.
They're able just to empathize and connect in that way and to deliver a searing performance the way they both did. You know, it just speaks to the power of the art form that you're talking about. It also speaks to the power of independent media. So I think just those two, marrying those two elements together, to us is a no-brainer. Some people might not understand it, but I just hope people, when you say people, you know, where's the protest music? Just take 20 minutes. That's really what a Newsbeat episode is. Take 25 minutes and just listen, and you'll hear those sounds. It may not be protests, you know, but they are, you know, explaining to people. They are portraying what's happening in the real world, what's happening on the streets.
As valuable as anything else. You mentioned it. Shouts to our other artists in residence, Liquid. Liquid is a artist educator, fantastic artist just in her own right. She's a DJ. She's done a lot of music over the years. South Carolina, through New York City, done a lot of things. I have it up on the screen now. It's called Abused and Alone, Prison Rape in the Me Too Era. Now, a warning to anyone watching or listening, slightly triggering sexual abuse topics. But what I was just, I mean, you know, when you guys, sometimes we do it together, but when you guys come up to you know, with these ideas, these concepts, we heard about Me Too all over the place, everywhere in the news. And we never heard about this. It was so eye-opening to go through this process of constructing this episode and realizing that, of course, there's a problem of sexual abuse with women behind bars, positions of authority, the whole dynamic that everyone's, you know, hey, we're taking it down, but not for them. And you guys brought it to the forefront with this episode. We all did. You know, I put it together, I think, in an incredibly compelling manner. But you guys, man, just recognizing this issue existed and needed to be delved into. And I don't know, like, we often talk about how we get things ahead of the mainstream. We're on it. And then by the time we get to put it together with our little, you know, scrappy group, the mainstream media has already, you know, either right around the same time as us, sometimes after us, but they get all the acclaim because the New York Times, they put out a thing on redlining and climate change. And we did that already. Come on. But this one, I have yet to hear it covered as strongly and as effectively and as compelling as as we did, and that's in no small part. It's in a very large part to Liquid, who contributed to this. I want to play a clip for the people, so bear with me while I switch over. And this is a clip, again, a little bit of a triggering situation, but handled tastefully and incredible. Abused and alone, prison rape in the Me Too era.
Sexual abuse and sexual harassment inside U.S. prisons and jails is it's a nationwide human rights and public health crisis. The best federal research we have indicates that over 200,000 people per year are abused inside our government institutions. The abuse happens in every type of institution: prisons, jails, juvenile facilities, immigration facilities, places that are run by states, counties, cities. It's unconscionable that people inside our government institutions would experience this type of abuse and even torture. Once the government takes away someone's freedom, they take on the absolute responsibility to keep them safe. And really, when you think about it, inside prisons and jails is where we have the most control, right? So this is a place where sexual assault is actually preventable.
Millions of women across the country and around the world sharing their experience with sexual harassment and abuse online using the hashtag #MeToo.
The Me Too movement, it is growing this morning. Remember, Listen Wanda started it all, inspiring millions of women to share their personal stories of sexual harassment and assault.
This has been a very powerful movement. A new ABC News Washington Post poll revealing an estimated 33 million American women have been sexually harassed, and an estimated 14 million have experienced sexual abuse in work-related incidents.
I think that the Me Too movement on the outside has been extremely empowering for women on the inside. I think that they've seen that survivors' voices are being heard more, and that it maybe is okay to talk about this. Maybe they're not alone. Maybe there are people in the world who would understand what they've gone through. And I think that for many of the people that we've heard from, it has raised their desire to be a part of something, to be a part of a movement of survivors who are taking back their voices, who are empowering themselves, and who are deciding sort of to not be ashamed and to say, yeah, this happened to me. I deserve support. I'm going to get support, and it's not okay anymore.
I called for the guard. I called for the guard. He looked back. Our eye contact was confirmation. I was going where I can't come back. Even after the scars heal, my mental often relapse. He looked away and said nothing while they circled to attack. The first punch was blatant. My first sight of blood, I almost fainted. Ingested by fear, regurgitated. I protested. It's worse than being arrested. He orchestrated the attacks to flex the domination. Rather die than have my body invaded. Rob my house and bank account, but not this type of invasion. God help me. God left the room. I see the devil in the corner handing her a broom. What would you do? I'm fighting for dear life, taking one of them with me. And if I gotta die tonight, I'll make sure she won't forget me. The screams of silencing, it's like the embodiment, suffocating, never dying while they breathing free oxygen. Why you lie to me? I'm supposed to pay my debt to society. The crime and punishment have no equality. Uncle Sam's gavel to Billy Club Bill, supposed to be a badge of honor. It's a license to kill. I'm still alive though. A part of me arguably died inside though, but I survived, yo. Now I'm letting everybody know. I'ma tell it, I'ma belt it while there's breath in my lungs till every peak and valley felt it. Every woman, boy and girl that had their innocence stolen. You're not invisible, you're invincible, and now you know it if no one noticed. It's not your fault. We gon' point these monsters out till they all get caught.
There it is, y'all. Liquid. I mean, just a man. Listen, I can't even tell you. Yeah, I know. It's the first verse. It's that. Wait, sorry. We're back. Sorry. I know everyone. I missed a step. I apologize. A lot of technology behind the scenes here to make all this work. Once again, the great Liquid on Exana. The great, oh boy. I need some more coffee. Not coffee. The great Liquid on Me Too, Abused and Alone. as you said, Rashad, please continue. Hits you in your soul.
Yeah.
As in, say it again for the record.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, it's soul crushing when you hear the verse from Liquid. I can't believe how she pulled it off. I have no idea how, but it speaks to the entire issue that we were trying to publish on this episode. We were trying to tell people that this is an issue. Not only is it a horrific, these horrific atrocities occur in jails and prisons throughout this country, but what the people on that episode told us was that these women are saying "Me Too" behind bars too. They want the movement to recognize them and their suffering, right? I think that's the important part of why we wanted to do this episode, is to, as we always say, shine a light, right? And we try to do that to the best of our ability. And like with most other episodes, I just hope it came across.
Yeah. Again, major shouts to Liquid and Kathy Morse, the other voices in that episode.
A survivor.
It's so compelling. I'm super proud of what we do. If I wasn't us, I'd be so proud to be talking to us. Just again, not to pat ourselves, but I think we're doing it the right way. We're incorporating not only the voices of those who are going through the issues and those who know the issues really well, our artists, diverse voices. Half of our episodes are only women. First of all, our artists are going to be almost completely from the communities, from the demographics. Look, we often joke, look at us, we're 2.5 white guys. We can't be the voices of this thing, and we don't want to be. Y'all don't even hear y'all voices when we're interviewing the people. It's about the voices. So when you hear people say, we've got to raise up underrepresented voices, we've got to amplify we've been doing that since 2017, and we've been doing it to all these topics quite well. I put the link in the chat room. To those listening, you can subscribe to this podcast freely. It's at Newsbeat. It's 2 words. I like to say 2 words, one love. 2 words, Newsbeat. Wherever you find podcasts, you see the logo up top over here, red, black fist, microphone, Newsbeat. There's a couple of different podcasts that have similar names. Just want to make sure you know it's from us. Brought to you by Maury Creative Studios, of course. Once again, shouts to Jed Maury, our grand poobah, our leader on the hill, who's just making sure that we can do this work. This isn't always the most sexy or lucrative or this is down and dirty journalism. This is stuff. It's not flashy, but it's flashy. You know what I mean? Like, it's not cable news. It's not talking heads news. It's it's news. It's real work here, and it's not easy to do. And he helps support us in these endeavors. So we thank him and Maury Creative Studios, which is a very fabulous digital marketing agency also. So if you need digital marketing, by the way, let's not bite the hand that feeds. Let's send people there. Digital marketing for your company or organization. Shouts to Jed for that, for putting it all together. His heart and soul is in everything we do, and we appreciate him for that. So what are we doing nowadays? We're continuing to put out these episodes. We're continuing to work this blending of music and art and artists and artistry to cover topics since pandemic, since COVID season. You guys want to touch on some of the work we did? We have we have a few pillar pages of content on our website that has sort of themed collections of some of the episodes that we've done. They include our mass incarceration series. I'm showing it on the browser. They include our guide to civil unrest, which culminates with the great award-winning episode of Why We Riot, which featured Silent Night and original music, not just beats and dope beats, which we thank our producer friends, but also the band called Fuse. We had live music, a real band, y'all. We had like a real band with instruments and everything. Create that soundtrack. So mass incarceration, guide to civil unrest, which we'll circle back to at the end, and COVID-19. This was an interesting line of work. This showed that we not only could take on these sort of evergreen topics or wide systemic racism and mass incarcerations and political topics, but also tackle things of the moment. Can you guys explain how we handled covering social justice issues during the time of coronavirus?
I think it was just a natural fit for us. I mean, my wife will probably, I say it all the time. We were covering this already,
Right.
and now people are just getting, are latching on to some of these topics. But look, we were covering poverty. We spoke to the UN Special Rapporteur. He was on an episode of poverty. So we covered poverty. We obviously been covering mass incarceration and the criminal justice system, right? And and then, coronavirus hits, and then quickly we figure out, and it's sort of it's not surprising, unfortunately, as tragic as this sounds, it's not surprising that communities of color were hit disproportionately by the pandemic.
Right.
So, we already had some of these sources in line, and we were able to cover this issue as it should be. This is a threat to a lot of communities that are already suffering from poverty, from the scourge of mass incarceration, from all these other issues, from disenfranchisement, from being marginalized, right? So, we were able to cover it from that point of view. And, I think the first episode we did on COVID-19 sort of spoke to that, the first sort of real episode, where, it was about, we called it When Epidemics Collide, right? Coronavirus, criminal justice, and poverty. All these issues just coming to a head at once. And it just shows, it's just sort of opened the Band-Aid, of what's really happening in this country and how people are really suffering, throughout. And, you could yell about your 401ks or the stock market all you want. That's not the real America. The majority of Americans don't have 401ks, right? Or don't have a significant savings. So, I think it just, showed just, what's really happening in this country.
Chris?
Yeah, I mean, you had people complaining about not being able to get a freaking haircut. Meanwhile, let's look at COVID on prisoners. The U.S. is the world's largest prison state. There's 2.3 million people on a daily basis incarcerated. What's going to happen in there? So that's where we turn the focus. We try to think of who's not being represented, who's being affected the most, who's not going to make it to the mainstream, 10 o'clock news. And, it's, what you find, unfortunately, is this continuation of inequality and really, horrors.
Yeah.
So
I had to check. I had to look it up. I wanted to post this. When Epidemics Collide, Coronavirus, Criminal Justice, and Poverty, we released on March 24th. Just think about that. March 24th. When you look at the timeline of all the coverage, of all the explosiveness of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic, its effects on United States, when did you start hearing about how it was affecting those already underserved communities? We were early on this. We have always been ahead of the curve. And I just wanted to point that out. We followed that up in April with Coronavirus Behind Bars, Crisis in New York, and then a follow-up 2 days later, Coronavirus Behind Bars, Florida Jails, and Effects of Visitation Bans. We were talking about the explosive potential of coronavirus in jails and prisons. Back in March, Dr. Homer Venters was a guest, former head of the New York City jail system, health department in the jail system in New York City, Rikers Island, et cetera, who was on we had a bonus episode, right, where Dr. Venters said, this is going to be a problem in jails and prisons. Nobody's doing anything about it, but it's going to be a problem.
He called it a looming and perilous threat.
A looming and perilous threat. What ended up happening? According to Dr. Venters, who you could hear on the Newsbeat podcast, the podcast that won all these awards and got a bunch of rappers in it. I might remind you, a hip-hop oriented news social justice podcast with rappers rapping, rapidy-ass rappers too, like rappers that can rap. Dr. Homer Venters in March told us beware of this, and then what happens?
Look, there were some jails and prisons that, said, all right, we're going to release some prisoners who are extremely vulnerable, or people who, we don't really need to lock up anymore. It took a pandemic for them to realize that people who are aging or seniors or who aren't a threat to the community could be released, right? But unfortunately, as we reported in our last episode, the cases of coronavirus behind bars spiked over the summer.
Right.
A lot of the, as we document from one of the researchers at the Prison Policy Initiative, a lot of the laws that were being passed, or what they were doing to limit people behind bars in March and April and May, that turned in the summer. They sort of neglected all that. A lot of these jails and prisons throughout the country, I think at one point, 1 week in August, according to the Marshall Project, it spiked to 8,000 cases inside these facilities. And the New York Times has consistently weekly reported that among the top so-called clusters of coronavirus in the country, the far majority are jails and prisons. I think out of the top 25, 23 as of last week were jails and prisons. And these are the clusters of where, the virus is spreading rapidly.
Yeah. And we told people about it as well. We just brought it in the death sentence episode. Sadly, I often say I wish we didn't have to do this podcast. I think we're great at it. I think it's an award-winning podcast, for God's sakes. But these are all issues we wish we didn't have to. I think Silent Night said it's heavy for him. It's heavy for artists, especially when you're a person of color, an artist of color who's going through all of these things. And then having to write about them and contextualize them and put them into verse form. You could hear it in Silent Night's work. You could hear it in Liquid's work. Shouts to our other contributing artists, by the way. A plethora of geniuses in my estimation. Shouts to Napoleon, the legend, who's contributed to a couple of episodes. Just a prolific and incredibly prolific, brilliant artist. Shouts to Osiris Anthem, the end of the week world champion 2 times. Just a brilliant freestyle artist, a brilliant artist, a brilliant mind. Osiris Anthem, my man, my mellow. Shouts to Rabbi Darkside, who's contributed. Shouts again to Rebel Diaz and Cruise Control, who was from El Salvador, and they all combined on an episode about the origins of MS-13 and how the United States government has kind of made the gang that they want to then make it seem like the boogeymen from El Salvador. So we actually brought in a Salvadoran artist to make sure that happened. So shouts to, again, Silent Night, Liquid. Who am I leaving out?
Intikana.
Intikana. Ooh. We have a Puerto Rico episode. I wish we had clips for all these things. You got to go back and listen to the Puerto Rico episode. Intikana did his thing, but the whole episode is so insightful about how the United States has treated Puerto Rico for all these years. Man, listen, one of our best episodes as well. Whew, we got so much. Like, there's so much. I can't even.
We also have KM.
KM, one of our OGs, man. KM on the hijacking jihad episode, which is a fantastic look at how language is used to fearmonger. It's incredible episodes. And another award-winning episode. Religious News Association gave us an award for that hijacking jihad episode. So just a ridiculous roster of artists. I do connect. I do make it happen. My long time in journalism work in independent hip hop has put me in touch with so many brilliant people. And I've been screaming it from the rooftops for years. Like, yo, the brilliance in hip hop. Like, I don't know what y'all talking about when you say the hip hop is only what you see on the radio. You ain't looking. Like, you're not looking hard enough. But I know them, and we're going to bring them in and get them paid and put them on a record, and they're going to make these incredible episodes. So shouts to our entire roster of artists. Shouts to y'all again for doing this. And I just went off on a tangent thanking everybody. I forgot where we were talking, but the fact that we're putting these issues to light, again, sometimes ahead of and sometimes even without mainstream media catching up, is just so vital and important. And I
Yeah, I think an example is I got infuriated the other day. Not infuriated because it's good that these issues are being covered, but I got my weekend edition of the Times, I think it was last weekend, and I saw the story, splashy headline about redlining and how that's contributed to climate change and the horrific effects of that, which is heat, which kills more people than any other weather-related event in this country. Nobody talks about it because you see a hurricane coming. You like to send reporters into the beach so they can get waves crashing on them, and for splashy coverage. But we covered. This is something that the Times is covering. I guess at that point it was late August.
Late August.
We covered it. You could check, man, if you want, but it was March or April, right?
April 27th. Redlining and climate change. A deadly combination.
Redlining and climate change. So I think, as you mentioned, that just speaks to what we're trying to accomplish and how we're trying to find these stories that are under the radar, and then eventually they'll rise up, and you'll see some Main Street outlet cover it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you often find that. Look, we can talk about this at length offline, but in hip hop. A lot of the trends that happen in the underground make it to the mainstream, eventually. You know what I mean? There's a lot of, like I say, I think the power of hip hop to affect change, to improve humanity and uplift society, which is what this show is all about, is here in the people that don't get the spotlight. Look, I don't mind that Revolt TV, and y'all should know this if you're interested in this topic, you should know this. Revolt TV is having a political summit, and it has a lot of the, important people involved. On a celebrity tip, on an upper level tip. And that's important. Some of those messages get out to the masses, and that's important. Puffy, Vote or Die, and, Jay-Z and Meek Mill with the Reform Alliance. And these things are important. But just as powerful, just as important, are the thousands, not millions, that listen to Newsbeat. The thousands, not millions, that follow artists like Tef Poe and Rebel Diaz, and what Genesis B is doing to change the state flag in Mississippi. Part of that movement to encourage voting. Genesis B is on tour across the country with a evangelical group, going to tell evangelicals that you shouldn't necessarily vote the way the rest of y'all voting. Like, there's something wrong with that whole equation. And she's a hip hop artist, and she's performing her work, and she's, again, that right there, that grassroots stuff, I'm saying, is just as important because it's happening all over. So collectively, it's just as important as what LeBron James is saying on his Twitter account. Not unimportant, different. So I value the work we do, and that's why I love our artists, because they are artist activists. They have gone on to do other things. Again, Silent Night is Innocence Project ambassador because of this podcast, but also because of that's who Silent Night is.
Yeah. And one of the ways that I look at it, and, Rashad and I experienced this back in just the print, many times, we would do a story and crickets for a while. And then all of a sudden, the New York Times, or Newsday, or some of them, same sources, some of them very similar headlines, or if not the same headline. And the way you got to look at it is, that's great, right? Because the mission is to spark change. The mission is to get word out about these issues, to correct the problems, to hold people accountable. And the fact that now, the New York Times finally got around to covering redlining, a couple months after us, it's bittersweet, but you know what? It's actually a huge positive, because in a way, maybe we forced them to. Maybe who knows the genesis, but I feel that we put it
out to the universe,
putting it out to the universe, in a way, sort of injecting this stuff into public discourse, into the eardrums of listeners. You never know what can happen. You never know what it could inspire. And so
some of our leaders say that injecting stuff into you could help clean you out or something. I think that's actually, I don't know if it's connected or related, but
I don't know if we want to get into that.
That's what I heard. Once again,
future episode.
And that's what we've been doing on Newsbeat. I'm really proud of our work. I'm really proud to work with you guys. I'm glad you were, we had this talk. Thank you to everyone who's been paying attention and listening to us just talk about our work, man. We're so proud of this. We didn't touch upon so much, when we were out in the middle of the climate marches in New York City, the youth-led climate marches. All of these things are making an impact on society. And all of these things that we've covered, we've injected with music, hip hop, and content. Like I like to say, like my Manny Faces media production company likes to say, content with soul. So that's what we do. So I appreciate everyone, first of all, for tuning in, listening, paying attention to us banter for a while. We've gone sort of long because because I don't know. I like to talk about myself. I don't know about
20 minutes.
I know. I did say 20 minutes. I tell everyone 20 minutes, and nothing's gone less than an hour. This is the live version of Hip Hop Could Save America, the podcast with Manny Faces. We're here Mondays through Thursdays, 1 p.m. Eastern for the month of September, with a special Friday drop on the podcast feed only. So please do subscribe to the podcast wherever you subscribe to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. Just search for Hip Hop Could Save America. You'll get these dailies. If you're not watching and paying attention, you'll get them dropped there. But we're also doing a full length, the more traditional sit down, long, full length interview, polished and edited the way I do, that you've been used to for the past couple of years on Hip Hop Could Save America. Thanks to our sponsor, Newsbeat. What a coincidence. But also Funkadelic Studios. They operate in Midtown Manhattan. Back reopening for musicians to come in and do rehearsals and recordings. Safe, disinfected. They got the high-tech stuff. They're not walking around with wipies. They got the high-tech stuff to wipe down everything, to scan and everything with like UV rays and all kind of stuff. So shouts to Funkadelic Studios, our good friends, musicians in New York City. I know y'all listening because I know a lot of y'all. If you're aching to get back to rehearsing and recording, go see Funkadelic. And as I mentioned, Manny Faces Media, my company that kind of produces this live stream event and the podcast. So if you like what's going on here and you're trying to do some things, talk to the masses, I can help you out. Hit me up. And again, Newsbeat, man, this is what we do. I want to wrap up just by saying, look, in the last couple of months since COVID, although we've been covering the crisis in a lot of really effective and compelling ways, we haven't necessarily been able to work with our artist friends as much. We're going to try to start building that back up. But we have been able to still put out episodes like we talked about related to COVID directly. And I wanted to call attention to one particular episode, one of our recent episodes that was called hashtag Say Her Name, confronting 400 years of state violence against Black women. This was important to do, even though we may not have had an artist, at the ready, and we couldn't have necessarily pulled this off. We are very cognizant of the communities that we are trying to represent or trying to amplify the stories and narratives of. Again, they may not be us right here on the screen. They are represented in our artistry. They are certainly represented in the voices that we pull into these episodes. It had been a recurring theme that we weren't hearing as much about Breonna Taylor, for example, as we were about George Floyd. And some of that was chalked up to sort of social justice sexism. It's been a long-standing issue. I'm tuned into people that talk about this. Y'all are paying attention to people who are talking about these issues. It's super important that we cover this issue. And we recognized it. We put together some great voices. I have it on the screen now. Some great voices who spoke about this. Andrea Ritchie, Michelle Jacobs, who really broke down the historical tragedy of this long history of state violence against Black women. So in the wake of Breonna Taylor, as people like to say, as a lot of people who weren't into this fight, into this mission, weren't, part of these movements, rose up when they saw George Floyd. And as well they should. We said, don't sit back down and stay up for Breonna Taylor. And unfortunately, countless names of women that have been affected by state violence. So I just wanted to play a clip. I wanted to get it in. It's super important. I wanted to get it in. This is how we handled it. Even without an artist, we're still trying to do what we can do. This is from Say Her Name, confronting 400 years of state violence against Black women. I'm very proud to tell people. I don't do it to like, yeah. I'm very proud to say that when people aren't saying her name, we did. So.
Certainly, state-sponsored violence against Black women has existed from the moment the first Black woman was dragged to these shores.
Considered as a foremother of the African-American community, historians believe Angelo boarded a ship in Angola before heading to Veracruz and finishing her voyage in Jamestown on the James River. She appears in the colony's census documents in 1624 and 1625. She worked for a wealthy family and lived alongside white servants.
The women weren't just stuffed into the boats, but of course they were also used as tools of pleasure for the sailors who were on the boats. So not only were they shackled to other human beings in these insufferable conditions, but they were also brought on board to be raped and to be used as sexual tools for the sailors. So there's never been a time in the entire United States history where Black women have not been violently assaulted both by the state as well as individuals.
From that moment forward, Black women have, and in the moments leading up to that, through kidnapping from the African continent and through the Middle Passage, Black women have experienced all of the same forms of state-sponsored violence, state-sanctioned violence, and state violence as Black men and Black people of all genders, and additionally have been subject to gender-specific forms of state violence through certainly systematic and structural rape that propped up the institution of chattel slavery and allowed it to continue after the transatlantic slave trade was shut down, and also policing of parenting and pregnancy and motherhood and violent separation from children in many respects. I read a statistic recently that a quarter of people of African descent were separated from a parent or a child during the period after the transatlantic slave trade had stopped and the internal domestic slave trade had started or had intensified. I think another thing that many of us don't think about when we think about state-sponsored violence is that Black women definitely experience lynching, often targeted for standing up for themselves or owning property or being associated with members of Black communities who were being targeted, but that also the lynching very often involved rape as well as physical and sexual violence and mutilation.
After 5 years of exhaustive research and interviews with local historians and descendants of lynching victims, the Equal Justice Initiative found white Southerners lynched nearly 4,000 Black men and women and children between 1877 and 1950.
I'm listening to these people who are talking about when violence started. No, violence against Black people and against Black women, the whole breeding program when transatlantic slavery was outlawed, Americans came up with the idea, okay, well, we don't have to steal people from Africa. We can just make chattel, right? We can breed people in order to satisfy our needs. And so Black women were routinely raped, not only by slave owners, but by overseers, and then forcibly required to enter into relationships with other slaves that the slave owner thought had good properties and could produce more better developed, brand new piece of chattel through forced pregnancy.
Again, just informative, heart-wrenching, and necessary to get into this historical, how the history ties into the current day. Again, with the hope, there's a lot of talk. I'm conscious of all this stuff. There's a lot of talk about certain social justice, representatives who talk about sort of these issues a lot, and that there's a danger of saying, oh, you're capitalizing, you shouldn't be showing a lot of this stuff, you shouldn't be talking about this stuff. It's traumatic, and I understand that. I think we all understand that. We talk to the people that deal with this a lot, Andrea Ritchie, Michelle Jacobs, on this episode, to make sure that we're talking about it in the right way, these issues. So it is with extreme caution and extreme reverence that we cover these issues. We spread these messages. And again, Chris, as you said before, I think, as we all say, to try to incite change, try to incite, people doing something about it, not just feeling bad about it, but here are the organizations, here are the legislators and legislation that is being enacted to try and combat these things. And so, that's our work, man. That's what we do.
Yeah, and I just hope when you listen to an episode like that, as as Manny mentioned, you go to our website and there's so much more information that sometimes that we can pack into these episodes.
Yeah, I just show it now. I'm gonna go down and as you talk, I'm gonna scroll to see how long this damn article is that actually has
probably not
even
one of the
more.
longest, but I do want, like I think we get numb, right, to this idea of mass incarceration and the need for criminal justice reform.
Right.
And when in a moment like this where we're screaming, for racial justice and equality and defunding the police and other policies, I just I just want people. I think we just need to underscore just how much the prison system has exploded over the last 40 years, 500% since the 1970s. And during that time, from 1970 to 2014, women were the fastest growing population of incarcerated people in this country. It went from 8,000 women in jail in 1970 to almost 110,000 4 decades later. So these are the kind of things that we're bringing up in this, in this podcast where, there's a reason for all this, right? So, the punitive sentences that were enacted during the war on drugs, law and order policies, and that's something that we're again seeing with this administration during President Trump's campaign, is this idea for law and order, the need to quash dissent and to be tough on crime. And the reason we keep bringing this stuff up is because history repeats itself, right? We want people to be informed and understand the machinations and what creates these, what's happening, these frameworks, what's happening in this country.
Yeah. And Rashad brings up numbness.
Yeah.
And here's a time where for months, everyone is stuck inside and watching the news or, listening to the TV, and it can be numbing. It can be many other things. It's important that we always remember, and this is another thing that we strive to do here, is that these are living human beings behind these numbers. So you hear a number about 2.3 million people incarcerated daily, and okay, you hear it again, you hear it 20, 40, 50 other times. But, to both your points, in this particular episode, Say Her Name, one of the things we did was look at the report, that the African American Policy Forum, created. And what you'll find is a profile, of, I think, 45, 47 women and young girls whose lives were snuffed out, and learning about that, learning about them. There's a point in the episode where Andrea Ritchie is sitting there and she looks up on the wall. It's actually the lead of the story that we wrote on the website as well. And, she's like, I'm looking up at the names of over 100 Black women and girls who have been slain, and they range in ages, from 5 years old to 94.
Yeah.
And so, to both your points, yeah, I mean, listen to the episode and then, do your best to learn more about these issues.
Yeah.
Become involved or just tell someone else. But we talked about the wrongfully convicted, that there's an estimate that 2 to 10% of that 2.3 million people behind bars never committed a crime.
Right. And we've talked about the people who are sitting in jail who haven't been convicted of a crime, who are waiting for trial and can't get out because they can't afford a $250 bail. We've talked about bail reform. We've talked about, you mentioned before, defunding the police. Oh, defunding the police. Everyone's up in arms. We actually talked about what that means. We have an episode about defunding the police. We have the movement to close youth prisons. We have all these topics that come up in the news. We break down. And to your point, Chris, just listen. Just find us. If it's a social justice issue, we're probably on it. Come check out Newsbeat. Listen to our take on it. It's not cable news. It's not leaning one way or the other generally, but is as fact-based and as And there's an emotion to it. We try to attach the emotion to it, but in as let's say journalistically qualified way.
I mean, at the beginning of the Exonerated and Broke episode, we asked Alan Newton to try to convey what it was like being locked up in a cage, for 21 years. And his voice breaks. There's so much emotion and so much torture and so much anguish and pain that he can't actually vocalize it.
That you don't normally get that from, kind of a AP news story, let's just say.
Right. I mean, we 100%, we mentioned Andrea Ritchie when she's looking up at that wall. Kathy Morris in the prison rape story, talking about how she would just lay in her bed and pray for death. Therein lies, the truth, in the words of the people who are experiencing it, and then amplified by the artists,
Yes.
and that's what we do. So,
well said. Well, gentlemen, thank you for spending some time doing this with me. For everyone tuned in, Silent Nights in the check-in. Ridiculous thanks to Summer for everything. Liquid on the check-in. Our artists in residence, Liquid and Silent Night. Again, our artists are the reason why this is so fulfilling and compelling to me personally, but I think just as a product, as a thing. When you say social justice journalism mixed with hip hop, many things could be envisioned from that statement. I guarantee you, if you're just tuning in or you haven't been paying attention, I guarantee you this is the way it should be done. We do it through a blend of ridiculously talented, accomplished and acclaimed, award-winning journalists. Here with us today, Rashed Mian, managing editor of Newsbeat, Christopher Tawarski, editor-in-chief of Newsbeat, once again off screen but never far from our hearts, Mr. Jed Morey, the executive producer of Newsbeat, all of our artists, which we consider to be as much part of this endeavor as anything. Myself, Manny Faces, the producer, host, and artist liaison, and alchemist when it comes to how it sounds, putting it all together on a podcast tip. It's for anyone that knows me, knows me for a long time, it's the ultimate work of my life, and it's just a pleasure to do it. It's an honor to do it, and it's great to do it with you guys because you're pretty cool. Chris, yes. Rashed, sometimes. So I encourage everyone to check out the podcast. We're going to leave with our great snippet from our great award-winning episode from Silent Night, the band called Fuse, our Why We Riot episode. I'm going to leave with that just to show really where we're, it's sort of the penultimate kind of episode. It says everything. It's everything we want to be. It's everything we want to do, and it's been highly acclaimed, and I'm proud of that. But unfortunately, again, that story is not over because we did that story about why we riot, about why civil unrest happens, particularly in communities of color, when Baltimore was happening, when Freddie Gray was happening, after Eric Garner was happening. We did it back then, and we could it might as well be, unfortunately, released today. So it's a real, foundational thing. So we're going to leave with that. But is there anything else, gentlemen, that you'd like to get across to the audience? Anyone paying attention, watching or listening on Hip Hop Can Save America, about why Hip Hop Can Save America, about why what we do works, about anything you want to throw out there, something I haven't talked about? The floor is yours quickly, and then we'll get out of here with a snippet from Why We Riot.
I mean, I think we covered most of it, but like I said before, I think that this unique blend, and we said this 2-3 years ago, I think it remains true today, that we are probably the most unique podcast out there. Among them, I'm losing count.
There's a million.
Bill Clinton.
I think we're probably. I challenge anyone. find a more unique podcast.
But yeah, so with these artists, like I said before, these artists are embracing in some way their journalistic side too. And,
yes.
And as you said, they're contextualizing and they're condensing these issues into 16 bars, and it's incredibly powerful. And I think we sort of got around the subject, but we do pay the artists. So the one thing people can do just to help Newsbeat, to help these artists, is to obviously leave a rating and review. You've heard that all the time. Every time you listen to a podcast, it helps us get noticed.
Yep.
But also
subscribe, rate, and review.
But also we know times are challenging right now. It's incredibly difficult, but we do have a contribution page. I think it's called support, usnewsbeat.com/support. So if people can go on there and contribute whatever they can, if they can, we really appreciate it. It helps us fund the work that these artists are doing.
Very good.
I mean, well said. I mean, I would just echo all that. When you support us, you're supporting independent journalism. You're supporting independent music, and we thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can definitely do that. usnewsbeat.com/support. I just showed it on the screen. Please do so. Please go there and send love. Whatever. Again, as I've asked you guys for the Patreon account, which you could also do. I guess in this episode, go to do Newsbeat before you do me. Fine, it's whatever. Because as transparent as you know me to be, those who know me, that goes directly into paying artists. We have artists that'll do this for free. We have really talented, great artists that'll be like, yo, these issues are important to me. Intikana took the song that he did for us for the Puerto Rico episode, which I'll put on the screen right quick. It was a dope episode. And he took that, even though he did verses for us, he took that and made it as a song, put it on his mixtape or his EP. Why not? It's a song. It's dope. It's super freaking dope. They do it anyway because I know these artists. These guys have been, these folks have been working for years, and a lot of these topics have been the stuff of their music. But we need to respect their artistry and respect their talent, and we pay them. And everyone's had cutbacks and such. If you support this work, we guarantee that it's directly translates into paying for artists to continue doing this work. And if you need to hear it in full, subscribe to the podcast. Go wherever you subscribe to podcasts. Newsbeat, 2 words. You see the logo up there. Black fist, red background. Newsbeat, a social justice podcast, and we'll be doing this, and for God willing, as long as we can, to keep bringing these issues to light. Gentlemen, I thank you for your time. I thank you for your work. I thank you for your brotherhood. It's been a while since we were out in the field covering these stories, running through the city with equipment, doing interviews. You guys have absolutely done a fantastic job, a testament to how podcasting in the time of coronavirus should be done, could be done, will be done. And I point to us often, even though it's a little self-centered. I'm really proud of us, but if it wasn't us, I'd still be pointing to us. You do a good job.
I just want to quote James Baldwin.
Yes. Who came up in yesterday's episode. That's really crazy.
He said something along the lines of, the artist's role is to disrupt the peace. So thank you all for, helping us disrupt the peace, and the artists that we feature on the episodes disrupt the peace, and much love.
Thank you, guys. Once again, usnewsbeat.com for all of our episodes, all of our information, all of the full stories that go with everything, all the artist bios, all the bios of the voices, all the things. You can find at usnewsbeat.com. And again, once again, wherever you subscribe to podcasts. I want to take it out. I hope you're still listening to us to listen to the award-winning snippet from the award-winning episode called Why We Riot, featuring Dr. Cornel West, featuring Rosa Clemente, featuring Larry Ham, featuring
Elizabeth Nix,
who's not in this clip but is in the episode, wanted to give love, who breaks down a little bit of why everything goes to hell in times of civil unrest and chaos in the streets, that it is, I don't want to say warranted, but we understand. So a clip from Why We Riot featuring Silent Night, our artist in residence, and the band that he's the frontman of, the incredible fusion band, the band called Fuse. And then I'll take it out with some last minute housekeeping and we'll be out of here. This is Why We Riot.
I have some very sad news for all of you, and that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
So you just don't know when that's going to happen, but this is true all around the world. You got various riots in terms of rebellions against forms of oppression. And it's hard to know what the catalyst is. The deeper causes usually are cumulative. They're structural, they're institutional, they're economic, they're political, they're cultural, vicious stereotypes against peoples and so on. Jewish resistance in Poland. Well, of course, backs are being pushed against the wall. Palestinians in Gaza against Israeli occupation. Backs are being pushed against the wall. Each one of these you have distinctive conditions and circumstances. But there's one button that's pushed. Shh. Can't take it no more.
That history starts the moment there was a European who took an African and that African fought back. Our level of civil disobedience is nothing compared to what we used to do almost hundreds of years ago. Whether it was on the continent fighting back on the slave ship through the Middle Passage, through women throwing themselves off balconies and or committing fratricide so their children wouldn't have to face the horrors of being kidnapped, being enslaved. Like, the civil disobedience, the little bit that we see now, is an expression of people being fed up at one point, but it doesn't encapsulate the entire history of Black people resisting not oppression, but the system of white supremacy and capitalism and patriarchy. I mean, we're always going to have civil disobedience. People are going to get tired and they're going to rise up. They're going to rebel. That's United States history, period. But the level of what we see in the streets right now is nothing compared to what we've seen in the past in the streets in America when it comes to how particularly African American people fight back.
We begin this week with so much emotion and unrest all across the country after those devastating shootings. You see, some rallies, like this one in Minnesota, did turn violent over the weekend. Dozens of officers injured. This healing is going to be hard.
And we have so many striking images to show you. This encounter between a young woman and officers in riot gear in Baton Rouge. And last night, people asking for peace in Los Angeles, protesters joining hands, making a statement as the country mourns the loss of those lives in Louisiana and Minnesota, and of course, those 5 officers in Texas.
Say her name. Say his name. Say their name. Say our name. Why? They say my name wrong in their roll call. They think I should be happy to say it at all. They say I'm only trouble with my road dogs. Most of the time they only say it behind closed doors. They go to neighborhood I can't afford. The same me my 2 sisters and my dad was born. Replaced the family store with a fancy mall. Now it's $5.54 a can of corn. Got pulled over again. 3rd time this month, it's like a trend. Gave me the 3rd degree before they fled. Then try to have banter with my white friend. I take the train and get stopped and frisked. Try to vote and make change, but I got suppressed. I pay my aunt's tickets cause she been missing his, and I find out the city been targeting since the first offense. Another day, another raid now. Then the women get knocked, that's okay now. Feel like any minute I'ma break. Then the news say a bullet struck a child on the playground.
There you have it once again. The mighty SK Silent Night, band called Fuse, Lee Hogan's on horns, K Desiree, and Soul Clock on vocals. My good friends, the band called Fuse, Silent Night, our artist in residence, Innocence Project, artist ambassador, and cool cat. So featured on that episode. Once again, the Newsbeat podcast. We are 3/4 of the team that puts it together, but all of our artists are part of the family, and we thank them for their artistry. Gentlemen, again, I thank you for your time and for explaining what we do, why we do it, how we do it, and why we're the best podcast in the world, really. I mean, every Monday through Thursday, live and direct from Newark, New Jersey. We're here. Hip Hop can Save America live. And I appreciate y'all. Y'all can stay in the background and watch me finish up the show. And we'll get out of here. Listen, thank you everyone who's tuned in and turned up with us. Once again, live, Hip Hop Can Save America, the podcast. Monday through Thursday, as we just said, 1 p.m. Eastern sharp. every Monday through Thursday this month, the month of September. Then I'll figure out if I'm ever do this nonsense again. But for now, join in wherever you're watching me now, YouTube, Facebook. I'll be here tomorrow, 1 o'clock Eastern. We got the rest of the month is booked solid. If you like this, you'll like what we're going to do for the rest of the month. Trust me when I tell you. Go back and check out some of our other episodes. You could binge and just stay Hip Hop Can Save America for the rest of your life after this. Just keep doing it. Thank you again to Silent Night, Liquid, all of the artists that have contributed to the Newsbeat podcast. Once again, you can subscribe to that wherever you subscribe to podcasts. Newsbeat, 2 words, red background, black fist, microphone in the air, a social justice podcast that merges hip hop and social justice journalism. We like to say it's as if Democracy Now! And Black Thought had a podcast, baby. Special thanks once again to our guests, Christopher Tawarski, editor-in-chief, and Rashid Mian, managing editor, but more importantly, my friends and my co-workers and my colleagues forever. No matter BFFs forever. So thank them for coming through by subscribing to Newsbeat, supporting if you'd like to at usnewsbeat.com/support. And once again, after you've done that and you've given some money, if you do feel so inclined to support this work, all this fanciness takes, a few shekels here. Patreon.com/Manny Faces if you're so inclined. If not, you can share this, tell people about it. Hip Hop Can Save America, where we highlight and spotlight the ways that hip hop is being used in innovative, inspiring, and often surprising ways. Once again, this is a podcast, Newsbeat, that beat out the New York Times for best journalism podcast. It's not a fluke, y'all. It's the best journalism podcast. And it got rappers in it. And it's all full of hip hop. It's the best podcast in the world. This is the second best. I'm going to say it. I'll say it. My own podcast is second to my other own podcast. My name is Manny Faces. I'll be with you tomorrow at 1. If you're listening on the podcast feed, thank you. Tune into the live stream. Join us in the chat. Once again, shouts to everyone who's tuned in. Oh, God, do I got to go through the list? Summer, you're incredible. Silent Night. Shouts to Jamie Frankie on the check-in. Shouts to Sage on the check-in. Maury Creative Studios, folks. Again, shouts to Jed Maury for making this all happen. Shouts to Pablo. Shouts to Rachel. Shouts to Todd from the Bush. Shouts to you. And you. It's like, what was that old show? The Magic Garden. They never would say Michael, and that's like the government name. So I'm like, why you didn't do that? Anyway, I appreciate you. They're never saying Rashid. Rashid is never coming up on the Magic Garden. Thanks for watching, y'all. Thanks for listening and tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Hip Hop Can Save America. And if you didn't know,